Hello, my name is Evonne Marzouk, and my favorite thing is using my own gifts and empowering other people in their gifts to bring ideas into the world.
Welcome to the Finding Favorites podcast, where we explore your favorite things without using an algorithm. Here's your host, Leah Jones.
Hello and welcome back to Finding Favorites. I'm your host, Leah Jones. It is late on Sunday, February 28th. It's late because this week was all about Purim for me as a volunteer at my synagogue. I think I mentioned this last week, but Purim was the Jewish holiday that was interrupted by COVID last year. So while Passover was the first one we all spent at home, Purim was one where maybe you got a kids' carnival in, maybe you went to a modified Purim Megillah reading. Really, the COVID shutdown really started to hit us right in the middle of Purim, which last year was in March, this year was in February. So we went all out for Purim with, I think we did 4 or 5 events for different segments of our congregation. We played bingo. Last night we did our spiel, which is a funny play to retell the story of Esther and Mordecai. Then this morning I did a 2.5-hour loop around the city visiting families that had celebrated bar and bat mitzvah this year. So it was just a busy weekend for me. Yesterday I also attended a funeral online for a high school friend. His name was David Jerger. He was a gymnastics coach in Virginia. And David and I saw each other for the last time in 2003 or 2004. We ran into each other on the Green Line, which wasn't a line I lived on. I was house sitting in the suburbs for my supervisor. Realized he was in Chicago, I think, for an internship. We saw each other a couple times, but he was not a very online person. So, maybe he came to our 10-year reunion. I didn't go to our 20th because I was graduating from grad school that day. So David and I simply did not have an adult relationship. But he was 44. He died of COVID. He was in the hospital for a month. It's, we crossed the 500,000 death threshold on COVID. In the last couple weeks, hopefully we all know more and more people with access to the vaccine. And somehow these deaths at the end are hitting so much harder. I think it's the combination of a year alone, knowing that we knew enough to keep people safe at this point, but we didn't act early enough as a country to keep people safe. There's a lot. I have a lot of feelings, but David I don't know that I would have gotten a degree in chemistry if I hadn't been study partners with David in high school. And he was just like this good guy. I think he wound up going with my friend Rachel to prom. We were in this group of people that made very last minute prom date decisions because we were just all single, but all volunteering on the prom committee. And so we just sort of paired up at the last minute of who would go with who. So we had dates to prom. I could be misremembering that, but I feel like that's what happened. And he was just this good, kind person. And at his funeral, which was only attended by his parents and an aunt and uncle, he was a gymnastics coach. And they covered the altar of the church with the poster board signs from his gymnasts that they had taken to the ICU and the nurses had read to him. And then there was probably a 10 or 15 minute video with voice memos from gymnasts who sounded like as young as maybe 7 years old up to college aged, who had all these amazing memories of Coach David or Mr. David. It was really good to hear. I talked briefly to another high school friend, Janine, afterwards about how it seemed like David Jerger had become our chemistry teacher, Mr. Wonderly, who had also been a gymnast before we knew him. I know that this podcast seems to start with a new obituary almost every week, but it's the world I'm living in. So this week, I am joined by Evonne Marzouk. Evonne is an author of the book The Prophetess, and this whole episode is really us talking about her 20-year journey to publishing her first novel. Her favorite thing being bringing an idea to life. And so we talk about the first 6 chapters she wrote in college up until her launch in October of 2019, the writing coaches she hired along the way. And we know each other through ROI Community, the Schusterman Foundation, which I've mentioned before. So it's a joy this week to bring you Evonne Marzouk, learn about her book, The Prophetess. And please wear your mask, wash your hands, stay safe, and stay home if that's what you need to do to stay safe from COVID. Hello and welcome to Finding Favorites. I'm your host, Leah Jones. This is the podcast where we get recommendations from people without using an algorithm and learn about their favorite things. Today is my 4th guest who I know through the ROI community, if I'm keeping track in my brain correctly. Today I am joined by Evonne Marzouk. Evonne is in the DC area. We were roommates at ROI, so we met in Jerusalem, sharing a very small hotel room in Jerusalem, and have been able to keep up together for well over 10 years. She is an author, which you will hear more about, an environmentalist. She ran a program called Jewcology, and she is also works at the EPA. So she's also doing her part to keep us safe. So how are you doing today, Evonne?
I'm doing great. It's great to be here.
So good to see you.
You too.
So we were chatting a little bit before I hit record. How is, I can't believe we're coming up on a year, especially by the Hebrew calendar. Purim is quickly approaching, and Purim was the last normal thing that happened. So how has this strange year been for you and your family?
I feel like this year has been both really challenging and also has had some special moments, some gifts. I think that for me in my life, what is happening is I'm at home, I'm working at home and my husband's working at home. We've got us at home, doing their school at home. And so we're all just really trying to balance the opportunity and also the challenge of being together so much.
Mm-hmm.
We're dealing with a little guy who needs a lot of support in school, and but we're getting the opportunity to spend a lot of quality time together. I feel like I really do appreciate all the good times that we've gotten to spend together, and the fact that my kids are kind of bonding with each other. And I also, sometimes really appreciate a day when I'm all by myself.
Yeah, I can only imagine. I am on the opposite side of experience. I live alone with 2 cats. I've only seen my family a couple times in this year. It's been a weird one. I've never had a time in my life where time was just so plastic. That's the wrong word. Like an amoeba. Like, what is time? I can't tell anymore if something happened a week ago or 6 weeks ago. It's really, it has really been hard to track what's happening.
It's true. I was just saying to my husband that I've been thinking, I know this isn't the same thing. It's really, really quite different, but we're coming up on my mother's died almost 8 years ago. And when I was with her in hospice, there was this way that time was had this kind of quality that everything felt like immediate and intense and kind of terrible, but also really important and special all at the same time, to be with my mom in the last days of her life. And I know this isn't the same thing, but there's something about the quality of this time that reminds me of that.
Yeah.
This kind of immediacy and things are really hard, but they're also really important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do. I think there are those times in our lives. That's a great example of like a magnification of the time that we have together.
Yeah.
Have you and your family, have there been any special COVID hobbies or I don't know, like recipes that you guys have mastered as a family or
Actually, we made potato latkes for the very first time from
oh
scratch as a family. That was a really big milestone for us.
yeah.
My husband and I, neither of us really had like a family tradition of making potato latkes.
Yeah.
We would always just buy them, but we learned how to do it and we did it together. And it was really exciting. Like they came out with, like when I flipped the potato latke
Yeah.
in the frying pan, it looked like a latke. I was like, yes, I made a latke.
That's fantastic. It
Yes.
was a year that people because when I do Shabbat or holidays with my friends, it's always a potluck. I never have to cook a whole meal for myself. Like I'm never cooking multiple dishes. I'm just in charge of like one thing. So this year it has been interesting to learn like how to cook a more complete meal or which
Yes.
sounds so silly, but I've only ever been, you're the person who makes the challah or you bring the great like salad or you're the dessert person. And to suddenly realize like, I mean, challah and hummus is good for like one Shabbat, but it can't be every week.
That's right. Right. Yes. I think for us, I mean, because like we would always have in my family, we would often have guests for Shabbat. And
Yeah.
we would make like a whole meal intended for them. And in the beginning it was just so, kind of sad that, to just be together over and over and over again. We had to kind of come up with ways to like figure out what we were going to talk about and
Right.
find, new traditions so that, so that we could always have new conversations and so that Shabbat would still continue to feel fun, with a
Yeah.
smaller group.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense too, as far because you've got when you have guests and you have some like some input into the conversation.
Right.
Or did you guys find it hard were you overcooking for Shabbat at the beginning too?
Well, we do a lot of, I mean, we always overcook for Shabbat because then we eat that food all week. That's kind of
Yeah.
the whole system that
Oh,
we live
nice.
with. So that part wasn't such a big problem, but just the comfort, like figuring out what to do about the conversation. And you know what? We also started playing family games a lot
Yeah.
more to find things that would kind of keep things interesting
Yeah.
with the same group of people over and over again.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And what games have been crowd pleasers?
we just started playing Quiddler, which is exciting, and we just started playing Sat. Those are games that because we spent like months playing Monopoly, just Monopoly. Because my little guy is in first grade, and there are only so many games that he can really play.
Yeah.
But over time, we've come up with games like that we can kind of play where we give him a little handicap, that kind of thing, and then as he gets better at it, we can kind of let the handicap go.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's a nice way of saying it, to say handicap. Maybe I shouldn't say that.
It's I believe they still say it in golf, but now that you question it out loud, it does make me think there must be a new way to call that.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to offend anyone.
Yeah. It's just like changing his starting line.
Yes. So we just kind of give him like a little extra help.
Yeah, a little boost.
Yes.
Yeah. Fantastic. So we were talking and it's been, I mean, did we meet in
2008?
2008?
I think, yes.
Yeah. It's wild to me how long ROI has been a part of my life.
Yeah.
I'm really grateful for it and also wouldn't have guessed it was 2008.
I feel so grateful to be part of the community and so grateful for the microgrants that have helped me in so many things. And I was the founder and director of an organization called Kanfei Nesharim, which taught about what the Torah teaches about protecting the environment. like kind of sustainable wisdom inspired by Torah.
Yeah.
And we created like a really, really deep and comprehensive set of Jewish teachings about the environment, like for every parsha, for every Jewish holiday. And then we created this like 18 essential lessons that were collected into a book. That was actually part of the Dukeology project.
Okay.
That were like core teachings on Torah and the environment. And it was collected into a book called Uplifting People and Planet.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was that project was the project that I came into ROI with. And in 2014, I decided that, well, I mean, I just kind of completed that, felt like it was complete for me.
Yeah.
The organization continued and just last year merged with a new organization called Grow Torah. And the two organizations now continue as Grow Torah and are doing really, really great work
That's
teaching about Torah and the
outstanding.
environment. So, yes.
Yeah. And then one of the pivots that ROI made in the last 13, 14 years that we've been members is they went from being supporting projects to supporting people.
Yes.
And that's where we've been able to say, you know, my project that first year I went was called It's a Mitzvah. And it was, the question I was answering was, how does a liberal Jew learn the mitzvot? Like, how do you do a deeper understanding of the mitzvot if you are liberal, if you're active in a reform congregation, or maybe you identify as secular, but like the mitzvot are also ours to learn. And so it was about creating that opportunity. And so it was with my rabbi, with Rabbi Zedek, and we went to a bar in Chicago. And every month we picked a different mitzvah and we studied it. Like, where did it come from in the Torah? What is observance? What could observance look like? Why do people choose to or choose not to observe? And like after 6 years or so, I passed it on to the JCC. And it kind of felt like as we retired from our own organizations or projects that like, would ROI still have a place for us? But they did, because they supported us as people and leaders and not just the project we brought to the table, which I thought was a really outstanding organizational pivot.
Yeah, I've always found that to be so helpful because, so my organization, Company Sharing, was part of Bikurim, and other, took advantage of other sort of, organizations that support innovation, or organizations in the Jewish innovation space.
Yeah.
But there really wasn't until ROI, I think, any that actually just kind of took the leaders and supported them. And I feel like that idea that that a leader might leave their project, but they still might be a person who's pursuing other things, and to kind of trust that person is going to then find other great things and like to continue to invest in the next thing, even if it hasn't fully come to fruition yet.
Yeah.
I think is really brilliant, because it's not about the project, really. I mean, there was like a person who started that project, and
right.
Hopefully that person is going to move on to other things and not have to feel like they have to be attached to that project for their whole career.
Yeah. And so you're here today because a couple weeks ago I interviewed Eyal Halamish about running. Eyal and I met on a trip to Poland with ROI, and you reached out and you're like, I would love to talk to you about writing my novel. And then before we hit record, we were just like talking a little bit more in depth about what your favorite thing is, because writing is a part of your favorite thing, but that you have a lot of favorites. So when you think about your favorite thing, we won't get into like the idea yet, but what are some of the things competing for you for favorite thing status?
Wow. I mean, it really is, at first I thought it was an easy question, but then I really, the more you think about it, the more picking a favorite thing is actually really quite hard. I mean, in some ways, my favorite thing is like just hanging out with my family and feeling like we're together and, having a good time together.
Yeah.
And my favorite thing is, being able to kind of and completely opposite to that, my favorite thing is to be able to close the door in my office and sit and write for 4 hours, like with no one bothering me.
Yes.
I think a part of my favorite thing, like I'm a very, spiritual person, and feeling connected, spiritually, feeling connected to God, praying, meditating. Those things are definitely favorites for me. I think that one of the most favorite things for me is the kind of experience where like you feel like there's like, hopefully maybe it's a purpose or some role that you feel like there is for you to fulfill, that maybe feels like is kind of a mission or a purpose in life, and that you kind of feel like you're kind of right that in there fulfilling that, doing that thing, being part of the creation of the thing,
Yeah.
and being part of the fulfillment of some kind of vision or some kind of picture that you've had, and seeing that thing come to life is really one of my favorite things. I think there are a lot of things that, it's funny, like things that are things I notice, like as I'm thinking about it, like some favorite things are sort of very passive and some are very active
Right.
and some are very creative and some are more, relational.
Right.
um
Right. That there are things that there's pop culture and culture. There's things that other people create that we consume. There's the things we love because we're creating it. There's the community aspects of the things we love to do, or that because they put us in community with people. That there's a lot of, I've interviewed people about knitting, about I wonder if I don't actually know if I've interviewed anybody about baking yet. Movies, types of books. I interviewed somebody yesterday about the Discworld novels by Terry Pratchett, like the whole universe of fantasy novels. So for some people, it's like a very specific item, but for you, it's more this concept of imagining, seeing a vision, and bringing it into the world.
yeah, I think so. I think it's about, and feeling like that's, I don't know. I feel like there's kind of a moment where you feel like, like it's been described in Jewish mysticism, right? Like, it's in what's in it, Kiva Tatz's book, that there's like this like sort of flash of lightning, that like if you were walking in the dark and you had no idea where you were going, that then sometimes in life like a flash of lightning happens and all of a sudden you can see and you kind of know where you are
Mm-hmm.
and you know what you're supposed to do and you know where you're going, and then it gets dark again, and then you have to kind of remember what you saw and like proceed in the direction that you knew you were supposed to go, even though like everything got dark again. At the end of whatever the fulfillment of that thing is, you get to this moment where like at the end, hopefully like you kind of get to that place and you're like, right, this is exactly the way it was looking
Yeah.
when I saw it in that sort of flash of insight. And you kind of have to hold on to that little to that moment of insight, and then carry that through. And if you can do that and kind of get to the end, I find that to be a really miraculous and fulfilling experience.
I've never heard it described that way, but it is such a visceral, because we've all been in, at least in our car. I don't hike in the dark in lightning storms, but I have been outside where a firework goes off or a lightning hits and you're just like, whoa. And you can see everything suddenly and it's so clear and then it's so dark.
Right.
And I can think of some creative projects I've done that I can't, I've got this like kernel of an idea for. It has been a screenplay, it has been a novel, it has been a short, like I just have this idea that I saw it. I was traveling in Italy and I've been like playing with it since Christmas 2003.
Wow.
That I can't figure out like what the shape of it is.
Yeah.
But I have this story that like I must tell, and I have
Yes.
started it and I've outlined it. I've like, this is the comedy version of it. This is the heart-wrenching drama. This is the short story. But it's such a powerful image.
Yes. Yes. I think the book is called Living Inspired. Keep its hats. Yes. but yeah, I mean, it's a good description of actually the experience of writing this book for me.
Yeah.
Because the book is called The Prophetess, and I started writing it when I was in college. So like way more than 20 years ago.
Yeah.
With this kind of feeling like what you're describing. Like that
Yeah.
there was this story that I wanted to tell, but like I couldn't. I started writing it as like part of an independent study in college. I was a writing major in college.
Yeah.
And like I just knew that like I had this character, Rachel, and I had this like kind of problem that she had of basically having visions, or basically having God talk to her,
Yeah.
and trying to figure out like what is this story? Where's it coming from? How can I tell this story in a way that really like honors the original vision of what I'm trying to say? And it took a long time to be able to tell that story.
So the title of the book is The Prophetess.
Yes.
When did you publish it?
It was published in October 2019.
Great. So you did get to do some of your launch in person.
I did.
Like you did get to do some like author events out in the world.
Oh, I'm so grateful for all of those. They were so magical. And for maybe, 5 months, I think I got to have a launch party, lots of really good, events with real people in front of them. It was great.
So I'm so happy for you.
I missed that so much.
Right?
Yeah.
And it's a YA novel, yeah? Or
yeah, so it's like 12 and up.
Okay.
But I like to say that it's for teen girls, and everyone with a teen girl still living somewhere inside of them.
Oh, that's beautiful.
It's been loved by young adults and also by adult women.
Yeah.
And a few men too, like, but so if a man feels like this is inspiring, like you should read it too. But, but mostly targeted to women.
Great. So you had this idea in college, and it's independent study, but did you have a professor what was a little bit more context about, tell me a little bit more about the context of that independent study. Is this like, it's your senior year and this is your senior thesis project, or?
It may have been my junior year.
Yeah.
My advisor actually at Hopkins was Stephen Dixon, and he was a writer and somebody I really looked up to. Unfortunately, he just passed away quite recently. But he was, at an advanced age.
Yeah.
But, yes, I'm sad that I wasn't able to share this with him.
Yeah.
But I was in the writing seminars program at Johns Hopkins, and they offered a number of different classes, and like short fiction and long fiction. And so I was in a class called The Long War, and which was about writing novels.
Okay.
And after finishing that, I wanted to, it's a long time ago, so the details are a little fuzzy for me, but I think I wanted to not take a class for the next semester, like that I was going to do one less class and then do this independent study instead.
Yeah.
And that gave me the opportunity to focus on really working on this story. And I think I only maybe got 6 chapters done during the independent study.
Yeah.
The truth is that by the time that this very first draft was finished, it was 700 pages, and almost none of it went into the final book.
Like, really?
Yeah. Yeah.
So the first 6 chapters weren't 700 pages.
No.
Okay.
Here, I know that we're on a podcast, but here, this right here, can you see it?
Yes.
This was like the first draft. Do you see?
This is amazing. So Evonne has gone to the bookshelf behind her computer and pulled out like a 3-inch 3-ring binder that is full. There is not an extra inch for turning paper in that binder.
Yeah. So, and you can see like some of the pages printed in pink because I think I like at that time maybe only had pink paper and just needed to print it. Yeah, it was in the wrong. So later I changed it from third person to first person. So I had to rewrite the whole thing. I think the final version that was published was the 8th draft.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So this first draft that you did.
Yeah.
First 6 chapters in college.
Yeah.
Did you write, was the next time you picked it up When was the next time you revisited Rachel?
Oh, so I mean, I was writing the story it's more like when I stopped than when I started. Like I was
Okay.
continually working and then like life would sort of intervene.
Yeah.
So I remember that like I wanted to write it and then like I started this organization, Come Finish Arian,
Yeah.
and that started to like really take off. And then that made me really busy. And then at some point I thought I would write it before my first son was born, like while I was pregnant. I was like,
Right.
it turned out that's not the right time to write a book. Then I thought maybe I'd do it during maternity leave. That the
Yeah.
first, but in the end, like how I managed to do it was during my second son's maternity leave. That actually was like finally like I was like, this is my chance. I'm doing it, and
Yeah.
that was actually what I finally. I got a writing coach, and I like really committed a certain number of hours per week, and just started to really focus intently on just getting it written
Yeah.
and finished.
And in that, because if anybody had ever asked me what you studied in college, I never in a million years would have come up with writing.
Oh, really?
Well, because you're the environmental person. Like,
right.
Surely it was biology or maybe like sociology, but I never would have gotten to literature. So when you published it, for me, I was like, whoa, Evonne writes books? This is shocking to me, but probably only because I'm a long distance friend.
One time I saw a commercial, I can't even remember what it was for, but the woman was basically saying, she was like, I do a lot of different kinds of exercise, but basically I'm a runner. And when she said that, I was like, oh, that's me. Like I do a lot of different kinds of communicating, but basically I'm a writer.
Yeah.
Like all the different kind of environmental work that I've done, like at bottom has been writing or editing,
Yeah.
putting together Jewish sources or, putting together Divrei Torah or programmatic materials, but all kind of, written materials to help people understand things. And writing really was my first love. I've been writing. My first story was written when I was in 5th grade.
Yeah.
It came before all the other loves of my life,
Yeah.
actually. Yeah.
When your second son was born, during that maternity leave, you got a coach. You got when you talk about when I finished writing it, is that you finished the draft that was third person before you came back and rewrote it in first person, or is that the first person draft, do you think?
Well, I mean, I think I feel like I'm looking back up at my shelf to see if I should bring you back down more drafts, because I've got like a whole row of them.
Oh,
like
wow.
all the different drafts on the top shelf of my desk here. But I think by the time I got the writing coach, I had already switched perspective to first person.
Yeah.
My challenge with the story was that I kept writing it, but not finishing it. Like I kept writing the easy scenes over and over again, but there were parts of the book that I had never quite figured out, and I hadn't written them ever. But I knew it's like, like the old story, like, insert dramatic scene here.
Yes.
like, and so there were just parts that I had just never really gotten to, really, really force myself to sit down and figure out. And the writing coach, helped me to see that that's what I was doing. And, so I, made her a promise that I would write 4 hours a week and that I would write everything. And what I found helped me was I made up, like, I listed the 100 scenes that I felt like were necessary for getting the story accomplished, because I had way more than 100 scenes.
Okay.
Like, and so I kind of like, I have this like little color coded chart over here where I put like all the scenes for all the various different plot lines and managed to minimize it down to 100 scenes. And then I broke those 100 scenes into 12 pieces, and then I wrote them out of order. So I wrote, like, it was kind of like the way an artist might draw with their left hand. Like, so I removed from myself like the chronological structure.
Okay.
And just wrote like the various different pieces. So I wrote like section 10 and then section 3, section 4 and then section 1, to kind of, and then force myself to write all the different pieces, all the different required scenes. And that's how I ended up with a first draft, the writing coach helped me find a developmental editor who gave me a lot of really helpful feedback. I went to her with like a set of known issues. Like, I don't know how to solve this problem. I don't know how to solve this problem. I got a lot of really good feedback out of that. So
yeah. Wow. So next weekend I'm taking a class. My friend Brandy Agerbeck, who was an early guest on the podcast, she is a graphic facilitator, but she also teaches people about visual thinking skills, like how to use drawing as a way to get your ideas down. Mm-hmm. So I'm taking this class with her next weekend called The Stack, which is like she uses index cards to organize everything. Mm-hmm. And part of why I'm taking it is I have the like Italy idea, but I also have a Hallmark Christmas rom-com about podcasters that I have outlined that I think is marketable because it's just they have truly like a 13-point outline, right? There's the problem, the meet cute, they rub each other the wrong way, the near kiss, they don't kiss, they fight again. Like it's a pure outline. So I'm going to this class because I was just like, maybe I can get down on index cards the beats of the screenplay, because I think it's an idea that I haven't been carrying with me since 2003. So I want to like move fast and break things and just get it on paper. Mm-hmm. But I cannot, I feel frozen. So this way that you're describing it of the 100 scenes that you need to get through the story sounds almost like what I'm taking a class in next weekend. Being
stuck as a writer with a story that you want to tell, but feeling frozen is, a very common experience. And the answer is always, you just have to sit and write it.
Yeah.
I also have my set of 3x5 cards that I used for mapping out scenes and moving them around. Yeah. I have all kinds of things, you do need those kinds of tools, but in the end, like they say, right butt in the chair. That's what it is.
Yes. Yeah.
So.
So you had a writing coach who then does like a relay with you and gets you to a developmental editor. Like, how did you find out these are people available to me?
Right.
Like,
first of all, I have to give all the credit to ROI for providing the micro grants that enabled me to hire these people.
Yeah.
Right. Because like a lot of authors have to put in a tremendous amount of their own money before they ever get, a book written. And I was so supported by these micro grants.
Yeah.
So, it gave me I felt like I had money in my hand that I could go to people with and say, like, I have a grant.
Yeah.
And a lot of these people would work for much more than an ROI micro grant.
You were in a personal development class.
Yeah. So I was in a personal development class, and I had a friend in that class who had written a book. Her name, her name is Jennifer Koken, and her book is called When I Die, Take My Panties. She's like a humor author, and she wrote about her mother who died of ovarian cancer, but she wrote like a funny, like kind of memoir about this experience of being with her mother when her mother was dying of ovarian cancer. Yeah. And she used it as a way to kind of share about ovarian cancer and, to raise awareness about that. She recommended me to my writing coach, her name is Kristen Muller. And she, it's really, so this is a Jewish story, but it's not just for Jews. Like it's, lots of people who aren't Jewish have liked it. And it was really, really important to me to like have people who weren't Jewish be the people who helped me write it.
Yeah.
Because it just needed to be able to communicate beyond the Jewish community.
Right.
I felt like if I knew that like someone whose name was Kristen Muller could love the story, then I was like in the right lane.
Yes.
So she was the writing coach. And she gave me like a list of like 4 developmental editors, and I interviewed them. And again, like since I had ROI money, I could say like, I have $1,000. What can you do for me? And so I got this developmental editor. Her name is Elizabeth Bartesius, and she was really wonderful. Just was able to kind of see the story that I was trying to tell and help me figure out how to like, the places where I couldn't figure out how to bridge the gaps. Like
Yeah.
she just had techniques and tools for how to do that I wouldn't have known.
Yeah. So she had tools and techniques, but was she actively pitching you like, well, what if Rachel did this? What if Rachel did that? Or was she saying, go make a list of 20 things that could happen?
So, for example, one of the best things that she did, this was actually, she worked with me twice. And so she gave me really good feedback 2 different times. And so she worked with me and she helped me to kind of think through about how to develop the characters, how to make the characters more like, so for example, like she said, Rachel in the first draft that she saw, Rachel was like too passive. So like how to figure, so like you have a girl who's called to be a prophetess.
Right.
And like, it's easy for that to just be something that happens to her.
Right.
But it's not so interesting to read about something that happens to someone.
Sure.
Like it's much more interesting to read about someone who's doing things. And so figuring out how to make Rachel the kind of person that you would care about and be interested in hearing what was happening to her, who like already had her own commitments and her agenda and everything like that. So it's not like something just happened to her, but like that she was sort of involved in her own process.
Yeah.
So that was one example. And then in the second draft, so I rewrote the whole story after I got her feedback. And after that, I sent it to her a second time. And this thing here that I found so helpful in the second round of reviews is called the Story Grid Spreadsheet. And it's this method of identifying the shift in emotion or like the shift in energy in each individual scene of the story.
Wow.
And so what she did was she took, for every single chapter, she gave me like this whole spreadsheet that had like, what's the word count of the chapter? What's the shift in sort of the sort of mood from the beginning to the end? And like, what's the shift? Like, does it go from positive to negative or negative to positive? And like, where's the turning point and how long does it take? She gave me like all this information. And she showed me where, like from in a scene or in a chapter, like there was no shift. Like, so here, like there was a scene where it was kind of like curiosity to curiosity.
Yeah.
Like what does that get you? It's nowhere. Like, and she showed me like there was this whole section of like 2 chapters in this draft that was like draft number 4 or 5 that like it just was all curiosity for like 2 whole chapters. And that's boring.
Yeah.
So she helped me to kind of figure out, it's funny because like I was asking questions about pacing, like how do you make a story go like feel like it's flowing, like it's going fast.
Right.
And I thought it had to do with making things happen quickly, but actually it all had to do with that, with like shifting you feel like a story is moving when the sort of emotional charge of a particular scene changes from the beginning to the end. You feel like you've moved somewhere. And so that like kind of starting it in a particular place and then knowing like how to end it in a way that like, feels like you've moved is what makes a book feel like things are moving.
Yeah.
And I feel like it helped to make the book an easier read because there were places in the earlier drafts where like you would just be reading, you'd start getting bored. And I was able to kind of see, oh no, that's because I haven't, changed the way people are feeling. How people are feeling, what the mood is. And, if I would change the mood here or cut out a scene that's not necessary, then it would feel like things were moving and you wouldn't want to put it down.
That's so interesting because you exactly think that it's the pacing of room to room, event to event. But if that were the case, then movies that are like the Before Sunrise trilogy, which are just 2 people talking, it's got to be about the mood shifting or
right. That is about the feeling of evolution that happens in a story. And you think that it must be about like making things happen fast, but some books, like the whole thing takes place in a weekend,
Yeah.
right? So it's not really about like things moving fast. It's really about this feeling that things are changing in the way people are relating to each other or to their situation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is like a master class for me. Because I've never gotten so far into writing something like a long. I've done short stories, but I didn't. Right, like I studied chemistry. I don't think I ever took a college literature course. I'm a reader and I'm a writer who never. I mean, I've taken writing classes as an adult, but like I've never studied it in that way. But that's such. So if you were to write a second book, do you think that is this a tool that you would, after a draft, go through and track on your own, or is it something that was really helpful because she reported back to you the emotions that she found?
No, I think I would definitely track it on my own. I mean, I was able to take this tool that she gave me and use it, like apply it even more deeply than what she gave me.
Yeah.
It was, once I kind of started to get attuned to it, I could start to feel what was working and not working.
Right.
But I mean, I think that's a really useful part of the editing process that I feel like I definitely will carry with me. But I mean, the writing process, I mean, I would love to write a sequel of this novel, and I've started kind of playing around with it, but writing itself is still, just you got to sit there and see what comes.
Yeah.
So it's still the writing. I don't know that the writing has gotten a lot faster, but maybe I'll be able to get a sequel done in sooner than 20 years. That sounds like a good goal.
Yeah, I imagine the writing may not take less time, but the drafting, you might start on further down the road the next time. Because you have
Yes,
more tools at your
hopefully.
disposal.
Yes, hopefully. And I won't make the mistake of anyway, the original drafts like kind of started too early. It's like a story has to start at a particular place. And
Right.
so yeah, so it's true. I have learned things.
And when you go to write a sequel, now you know her.
That's
She's
true.
not a stranger anymore.
That's true. That's true. Yes. And a lot of the other characters too.
Yeah. Were there other, so after the developmental editor, like when does a copy editor or an agent, or when do the other people that help you bring this to life come into the picture?
Yeah, so I had incredibly lucky or blessed. I think maybe blessed is probably a better way of saying it. I worked in college for a publishing company
Mm-hmm.
called Bancroft Press, and based in Baltimore. And I was an intern there, and then I had a summer job there. And I had not really been in touch with the publisher for a long time, but I wrote to him and told him that I had a book that, this was around the time of that the developmental editor had the book the second time. And so I wrote to him and said, I put together a book and I'm interested in talking. And he invited me to his office. We talked for a couple hours, and he said he would like to consider the book.
Wow.
And I think he might have been humoring me at the time.
Okay.
But he said we had a really good conversation. And when the book was, ready, I sent it to him. And I think it was funny. There was like a point early on where like he has interns still, just like I was an intern. He gave the book to an intern, and the intern really liked it.
Yeah.
So then he read it. He started reading it. At some point, like, sent me an email saying, like, all kinds of nice things. Like, this book is like nearly flawless, and like the story is really interesting, and like I'm going to keep reading it. I later realized that was like the moment when he like kind of got to the point where he was like, I'm gonna have to finish reading this book, and I might have to publish it because he
Right.
liked it. I think up until that point, it was still a little unclear to him, but once he started reading it, he really liked it. And so, I mean, this never happens, but the first
Right.
publisher that I pitched bought the book. I it's a small press publishing company, and so they don't work with agents. Like, so if you work with a small press, you just pitch them
Yeah.
directly. It was perfect for me because I already knew him. We'd already worked together. Baltimore is very near where I live outside of DC.
Yeah.
So and, easy for meetings or other kinds of things. So, yeah, I feel really fortunate. And so his interns did a lot of the it didn't really need so much copy editing, but there were things that the interns provided that were very helpful in terms of, their reaction to the story, and, different parts, like, to tone down or sort of strengthen. And also the biggest thing was the publisher. He asked me to reduce the book. It had been 140,000 words, and he asked me to reduce it to 100,000.
Woo!
And that felt like, at the time, was kind of like, how do you do that? But
you're like, I already reduced it from 700 pages.
Yes, exactly. But it was, you know what? It was totally the right thing. I mean, I was able to do it. I went, I looked to see, which things could be trimmed or,
right,
tightened. I didn't have to change any of the plot in order to get it from 140,000 to 100,000 words, which is evidence that extra 40,000 words wasn't needed.
yeah,
Just slowing it down. So
did the interns help with those? Did they help you brainstorm what parts to take out? I'm curious if they were Jewish. Like, did they help you say, like, these things are unclear to me from a non-Jewish perspective? Like, did they help you find places where you maybe needed to, like, give a little explanation?
Not so much. I mean, one of the interns, the most important thing that an intern, so there were a few things. Like, so some of the interns helped with, there were a few scenes in the book that were like a little, so to explain, Rachel is a 17-year-old girl who's like unexpectedly called to join a secret community of Jewish prophets. She's like unexpectedly called with the gifts of prophecy. And I should just explain for the audience that, so far as I know, there's no secret community of Jewish prophets.
Right.
There's really not prophecy as we understand it in Jewish thought today.
Yeah.
Where God gives people visions,
right,
and talks to them, or gives them visions. But there is something like that's kind of like what we call Ruach HaKodesh, like sort of divine inspiration. That's kind of the highest level that we have access to right now. Anyway, so in order to be taught these sort of prophetic arts, this older man, like a man in his 30s, kind of appears in her life. He's been sent to teach her. His name is Yonatan. He's actually one of my very favorite characters. He's like recovering from his own personal trauma, and he's, been called to do this extraordinary thing of teaching her.
Yeah.
Anyway, and so the interns were concerned that the relationship between Yonatan and Rachel might seem creepy.
Yeah.
And so there were different ways that I had to work in, it was very important for, just for the way the story worked, that it be a male-female teaching relationship.
Yeah.
But it's, it creates all kinds of tension and challenges, and you don't want it to seem creepy. And you could see how like a 35-year-old guy showing up in the life of a 17-year-old could be creepy.
Yeah.
And I wanted it to be very platonic, which it is, and very like kind of pure, which it is, but somebody who might not, on first blush, it might feel weird.
Sure.
And so I did like a lot of work to try and like have Rachel initiate some parts of their relationship. So it wasn't just him kind of, I'm going to teach you, here's what I got to teach you, and also worked hard to make sure that when he, like, for example, like they meet for the first time in an Orthodox synagogue, which is not a normal place for a man and woman to meet anyway.
Yeah.
Like to kind of establish at the outset, like that he, like to kind of have him in conversation with the rabbis so that we know that he's not like just kind of a stranger, to kind of create like ways to verify his identity as a trusted person.
Yeah.
So that their relationship would not, at first blush seem like something
predatory.
That you should, yes, predatory, that's the right word.
Yeah.
And I mean, Rachel takes like appropriate precautions in her relationship with him, and he also has boundaries. So like there's a lot of, boundary setting that I think is really important, especially for young adults to kind of, if a relationship like this is to happen, it should have boundaries.
Yeah.
But I like, so that's an example of something that the interns were helping me with. They were like helping me figure out how to, where it felt like it might have been too strong and how to kind of work that out so that it would feel less so.
Yeah. Oh, that's fantastic. When you thought back to when you were in their shoes, are there authors that you helped with story points or that kind of nuance? So like did you feel like you knew where they were coming from because you had that job before? And
yes, although I didn't get lucky enough to work on a novel, it so happened that there wasn't a novel during the time that I was
okay.
working there. But yes, I did. I mean, and when I met with them for the first time, there were these two young women who were working there. And, I was really clear with them about, that I really understood what it was like to be an intern there
Yeah.
and that I really wanted wanted to trust their point of view and representing a different potential audience for the book
Right.
than me and my friends.
Yeah.
So it was great to work with them and to kind of feel like, I was once sitting where you are and, maybe one day you'll have your own book.
I love that. What a cool isn't even the word. I need a bigger word. But what an amazing full circle experience to be able to go back to where you had once interned with a completed or with a manuscript in progress enough that they understand it is going to be completed.
Yeah.
You weren't going in with a 5-page treatment of a novel you thought you could write. You were going in with your fourth or fifth draft of it at that point. So they could see that you were really committed to the work of finishing it.
Yes.
So you're able to miss what to me sounds like a torturous part of the novel writing and publishing experience, which is agents and pitching, and you find your publisher because you found them during college, unknown to you.
Yes. Miraculous experience for me, for sure.
Amazing.
Yeah.
I do remember when you were getting like cover art. What was that like, selecting art for the book?
Yeah, so that was also another ROI supported piece of this work. Yeah. Because, I had like this picture in my head of what I wanted the cover to look like.
Yeah.
I don't know if anyone has studied the cover as closely as I have, but on the cover, on the left side is Baltimore. You've got your tree with the, in fall with the pretty changing leaves.
Yeah.
And this house that when I went around Baltimore, like I picked out as Rachel's house.
Mm-hmm.
And like this little creek that plays like a very important part of the story. So that's sort of on the left side. And then on the right side is the old city of Jerusalem.
Yeah.
So Devorah, who's the leader of all the prophets, has her place in the old city, the place where she lives in the old city of Jerusalem has like a star on the door, and so that's on the cover here. And then in the middle we have Rachel, a picture of Rachel drawn in with her green eyes.
Yeah.
So I really, really had this picture, this image in my head of what I wanted, and I was able to work with Avraham Cohen, who's an artist in Baltimore, to put it together. He actually, I'm close with his family, and he actually did the artwork for my ketubah.
Oh, wow.
So I knew that he was that he would be able to do this kind of art because I've seen him do it before. He's an artist. I paid him to do it. And I felt like I didn't think the publisher would invest in a piece of art for the cover.
Yeah.
So it was really great to be able to use an ROI grant for that.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That's fantastic. I assume they were then very happy when you're like, don't worry, I'm commissioning the cover art.
Yes, quite happy.
Nice.
Yeah. I mean, being able to come into a publishing relationship saying like, I also have, some resources that I can use to help with things that are kind of above and beyond what you would ever expect a publisher to do.
Yeah.
Has really helped because, some of the times like he's matched, ROI grants or that kind of thing, to try and make it more. But the fact that he told me that it was really unique to have a writer who had like, resources and that kind of a network, but also resources that could be mobilized towards helping with promotion and all the different aspects of the books.
Yeah. That's tremendous. So from the time that you met with him and you had been working with your developmental editor on the second round to publishing day, was that like a year? Was it 2 years?
It was a little more than 2 years.
Okay.
It took, so when we signed the contract in May of, so whatever. So I guess that it was in the summer of 2017, maybe?
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that sounds about right. When I met with him, and then we signed the contract in the spring of 2018. Is that right?
And then
And
it
then
launched in
and
October
then
of
it
19.
launched in October of 2019.
Great.
So I had this fantasy when we signed it in May that we were going to get it finished by the following June. But I was
Okay.
like, signed the contract like in the spring, and that it would be finished by June 2019. That was what I
Mm-hmm.
wanted. And he was like, that's a really tight time frame, but we'll see if we can make it happen.
Yeah.
And because I thought, well, people read books in the summer. I had like
Right.
this whole, but it took every minute all the way up until October 2019. And I had like final draft, like there were final edits that I was making like all through the summer of 2019,
Yeah.
to the point where like he was like, okay, you're done,
Like put your pencil down.
you're finished. You've
Yeah.
had enough bites at the apple, Evonne. Because it was just, I couldn't stop myself
Right.
from continuing to sort of tinker with it and fix things. And eventually it was published, and I still find typos.
Right.
So
Amazing. So this, when we again, what we talked about was one of your favorite things being you have that vision and bringing it into the world. So in October of 2019, what was your book launch party like?
it was so great.
Yeah.
It really was. We had it at so I live in suburban Maryland, and we had it at a mansion near my house. There's like a family that provides sort of their space for community events,
Yeah.
and so we had it at their mansion, and we had lots and lots of people there, and it was over Sukkot, so we couldn't, because it was over Sukkot, we couldn't have cake.
Right.
So we got these like chocolates that were specifically printed with like the logo of the book on them. And I spoke and did a reading, and some other people spoke, in support of the book, and lots of people bought books, and it was just, and my father surprised me and came from Florida.
Oh, how wonderful.
Yeah, it was just, it was great. It's a great night.
Yeah. And then you had the opportunity, you had like 5 or 6 months before COVID where you, I know that your Facebook has been full of, you've done panels and you spoke locally and you've done some panels. Were there any standout events from that? What have been some of the standout events that you've done since the launch?
I've done a bunch of different things. I did like a like sort of author in residence for a couple of synagogues where I spent Shabbat and did some speaking. I did, that was of course before COVID.
Right.
I did a thing with a writer's club where we talked about kind of the process of writing a book, which was great. I've done a number of programs with schools, and they've been really wonderful, just opportunities to be able to share about the book, the writing process, to answer kids' questions, to talk about creative writing craft. We've done a bunch of those things that have been really great. And next month, I'm going to be doing a book club for a synagogue in New Jersey.
Nice.
So that's really looking forward to that. And the school is going to do a mother-daughter book night around the prophetess.
Oh, I love that.
They're targeting like 8th to 11th graders.
Yeah.
The book, it's really like for, you could, whatever, 7th grade and up, but they're going to target 8th to 11th graders with their moms.
Yeah.
And they'll both read the book, and then we'll get to talk about it together. And I've also done a couple of bat mitzvah programs, which have been really, the kinds of programs where kids, like girls, are kind of learning before their bat mitzvahs
Yeah.
with their moms.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I've had lots of great opportunities, and I'm ready for more. I'm excited to continue to share this. I think we're pursuing different kinds of opportunities for the spring and for the fall, and also this is a great book for summer reading lists for
Yeah.
school. So if you're looking to like refresh your summer reading list for high school or middle school, this is a great book to put on that list. I have a teacher's guide for it. So so it's been a really great journey, and hopefully more to come.
It's fantastic. Where can people either follow you online or get more information about things that are coming up with the book?
Yeah, so I'm on Instagram, Evonne Marz, EVONNEMARZ, and I'm on Facebook. The Prophetess book has a Facebook page
Great.
where you can get lots of information, and anyone can write to me if you want to have other ideas or want to explore specific things. My book email is evonnewrites@gmail. So would love to talk more about possibilities.
That is fantastic. Is there anything about the writing process that I forgot to ask you that you'd be like, I can't believe I didn't tell Leah this thing?
I wanted to ask if I could do a little reading. Is that
Absolutely.
So I wanted to do this reading. This is from sort of towards the middle of the story. So like I was saying, Rachel is this 17-year-old girl who's been called to join a secret community of prophets. And at this stage in the story, she's just at the point where the visions that she's receiving are starting to have her actually have something to do, something that she herself needs to do to try and save someone or make the world better. And this is actually the very first time when Rachel is called upon to save someone. And so I wanted to share it. And I like to share this scene because, first of all, I think that sometimes I think that when we think of ourselves as, having to do heroic things, we think we're always going to know what we're going to, what that should look like or what we should do. And sometimes it's really not about feeling like we know what we're supposed to do. It's just about, the thing getting done, and it doesn't always have to be graceful. And I think that's especially important for young women to know, but also important for all of us to remember that it doesn't always have to be graceful. And the other thing is that I think a lot about this scene in terms of what it means to be a feminine superhero, that a prophetess one could think of as sort of a feminine superhero, not using the kinds of superpowers that like we think of as masculine superpowers, like dominance and power and strength, but feminine superpowers like insight and intuition and, asking for support, finding. I like to think of these as it's feminine superpowers, the insight, intuition, wisdom, knowing how and when to ask for help. And so I like to share this scene as sort of Rachel's experience of becoming a prophetess who can actually save someone, and maybe being a feminine superheroine. You've been scraping the bottom of that yogurt for 10 minutes, Lauren pointed out at lunch. Sorry, I said, glancing up at her. I was just thinking about something. Care to share? She asked, popping the last of her sandwich into her mouth. I shook my head. She tilted her head, curious. Are you still worried about that poetry kid? That instant seemed to last a long time, as scenes from a recent meditation flashed before me. Freed from school early, he sits in the secret place. Suddenly, I understood. Today, in the snow, today it was time for me to. What? How? Frustration descended on me so powerfully I felt almost dizzy. What was I supposed to do for him? Where was my clear instruction, my prophetic guidance? How could this be my responsibility? No one had answered any of my questions. Just as rapidly, my frustration was replaced with fury, then desperation. I stood, ignoring Lauren's puzzled expression and the lunch tray in front of me. I have to go. But we're not done till fifth period, she said. I shook my head, grabbing my bag. He's gone already. Outside, I wandered the streets looking for him. The snow was already half an inch deep on the sidewalk. The frigid wind blew snow into my face, freezing my nose and cheeks. My fingers felt numb inside my gloves. A stream ran under some of the roads in our neighborhood. That gully where he hid had to be somewhere nearby. Half dazed by the cold, I walked several blocks in one direction before deciding it was the wrong way and turning back. Blinded by my own hot tears, I tripped several times, finally falling and twisting my left wrist. Then I heard a low, terrible groan. I froze, staring around me. "Jake!" I screamed. Where was he? I waited, willing him to moan again. Oh. Then the awful sound of retching and such a long and terrible cry, I ran in his direction. His baseball hat had fallen off. He wore no coat or gloves. His eyes were wide open, his body convulsing in some kind of seizure. I stumbled downhill from the sidewalk to the stream, slipping a little on the snow. His shaking continued, spit and vomit dribbling from his mouth. I doubted he even knew I was there. Ignoring the vomit, I knelt down next to him and grasped his fingers. They were stiff and frighteningly cold, but when I blew warm air onto them, he recoiled. Wincing a little at my sore wrist, I slipped off my gloves and put them on his hands. "Help!" I shouted. There was no answer, only a snowy silence. I was too late. What if he died right here? I thought of that time I'd rescued Chris after his bike accident, knocking on doors until I found someone to help. But I couldn't leave Jake here alone. Hardly thinking, I opened my bag, tossing books and tissues into the snow. At last, my hands closed around my cell phone, and with trembling fingers, I dialed 911. "It's an emergency," I yelled into the phone. When I'd finished giving the details, Jake had stopped shaking. His breath came in shallow gasps. "Jake," I said, stroking his icy face with my cold fingers. "Stay with me. I survived only because of you." The words came back to me as if I was dreaming, but this was no dream. Jake lay unconscious, his body slowly being covered by the falling snow. Tears came rushing down my face, defrosting the tears already on my cheeks. "I tried," I said, wiping my tears with my left sleeve so I didn't have to stop stroking his cheek with my right hand. "I tried. Please," I screamed aloud. "Please, please." At last I understood I was praying. "God, God, let him live, please." I prayed like that until finally I heard sirens approaching in the distance.
Wow. I have full body goosebumps, Evonne.
Oh, good.
It is a stunning scene. I'm so excited to read your book. I think you capture so beautifully what I imagine would be like. She's a high school kid, right? She's at lunch. I assume Lauren is one of her besties.
Yeah.
You know, the poetry kid is evocative, I think, to us. And I assume to kids today, like you said, the poetry kid, and I'm like, I know who that is. Like, I know who that is. I know, like, where in my hometown the poetry kid would be hanging out on a cold day. It happens to be, as I look out my window, I happen to be in the type of weather you're describing.
Yes.
But I'm certain if I read this book in the middle of summer, I would still have full body goosebumps. That was thank you for choosing that scene to read.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to share it with you and your group, your audience.
Yeah. Great. So I will link in the show notes. Do you have a preferred bookstore where people should order the book from?
So the book is available on Amazon and on BarnesandNoble.com.
Great.
It is also available on Kindle. So for people who like to read Kindle, it's available like that. I think that if you Googled it, you could also find it in other places, but those are the main places right now. The important thing is just to look for The Prophetess by Evonne Marzouk. There are a few other books called The Prophetess.
Sure.
But there's only one written by me.
Yes. And I will have, obviously, also linked in the show notes, the correct place to buy it from. So this was so wonderful to talk to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
So So thank you for sharing this amazing scene with us. It gives people a taste of how you write, a taste of who Rachel is as a character, her surroundings. But when you're sitting here in 2021, where are you with The Prophetess today?
Where I am is really excited to share this book and to take it to the next level of engagement in the Jewish community and beyond, to really give everyone the opportunity to read this book and to have the experience of being inspired by the story and by their own gifts. Because, this is a story about gifts and about gifts that Rachel is called with and that she's growing into. And we all have gifts that we're growing into. And I really hope that this story will empower people and inspire people, motivate people to live into their own life purpose, their own gifts, their own visions that they're looking to fulfill. And where I am right now is just looking for all the opportunities to make this book available to people so that they can learn from it and really enjoy it and grow with it. And I would just love to be in touch with anyone who would like to continue that conversation with me.
Well, it's a great call to action. And I am so happy you took some time out on I was like on a snowy Sunday evening, but it's a Monday.
That's true.
It's a Monday.
Feels like Sunday.
It does feel like Sunday, for sure. Great. Well, Evonne, this has been a wonderful way to spend a Monday evening that feels like a Sunday.
It's been great for me too. It's so nice to get to talk to you after all this time.
Thank you for listening to Finding Favorites with Leah Jones. Please make sure to subscribe and drop us a 5-star review on iTunes. Now, go out and enjoy your favorite things.